I wanted to do a review of the PowKiddy V90. I've had this thing for, about a year now, give or take, and I never gave it its own video. Of all of the budget handhelds, this one weighing in at about $40, this one seems to have far and away the most longevity. I've seen models of handhelds in that price bracket come and go. They get made and they disappear, but this one has its little following of people that love it, and it just hasn't gone away. It is by far the most popular handheld in its price bracket, and it can do some great things. This one was a gift from Hemrock, and I got it the same time I got my 280V. I got this like the next day because it was delayed in the mail. So this particular version is running, he loaded it with the custom OS. Yeah, see the MIUI custom firmware. Now I have a Q90 that runs the stock firmware, and from what I understand, it is exactly the same thing. So this is a big step up. A couple of things I want to draw your attention to. Of all of the systems that I have, this one has the nicest volume control. It's a wheel, it's not a rocker, and it's a little on the sensitive side, but it's not crazy. So when he sent this to me, it had a different interface selected, but at the time I really liked the Open Dingix feel, and that's why it looks like this. From a technical standpoint, it runs, people will tell you PS2 or PS1, everything up to PS1, with a handful of PS1 games that it can play. I have never had any luck playing PS1 on this thing. This is what a lot of the PS1 games do. They'll load, and you'll get the menu in the title screen, but when you actually try and load the game, they get stuck on their loading screen. I see that more than anything. Here it is happening again with the original Persona. It's stuck checking memory cards. It appeared to load fine, but then it got stuck here. I don't know. Here I am in a game I actually play on this thing. This is Wizardry 5, which runs really well. You know, some of the Super Nintendo games that require, more resources, you get some slowdown. Even in this game, like if you listen to the music, it sounds fine, but there's certain portions where you'll hear the music drag, as if it's slowing down. But because it's a turn-based game, it never really affects, gameplay at all. I do my Nes hacking testing on this machine as well. I have my copy of the original Super Mario Brothers that I'm making custom levels for. I test that here. And also over on the Discord, we've been doing this thing where I ran the, let's turn that off. I ran the Zelda randomizer, and I was able to generate, this randomized version of the Legend of Zelda, and then distribute it so we could all play the same one. That has been the most fun here on the PowKiddy as well. So here's something I wanted to show you that I think is exclusive to the custom firmware. So the way this is set up, you have this one button here in the middle, which changes function depending on what you're doing. But by and large, it's supposed to be considered the suspend button. You can shut it down, and there you go. If you're using this, a lot, then I discovered you can use the suspension button. It'll save battery, and then it'll cut the boot up time, because that's the biggest problem with these handhelds for me, is when they take a long time to boot up, there's no point to just fire it up and play games for 5 minutes if 2 of those minutes are going to be spent, getting things running. So that's cool. But to shut it down completely, you have to use the software shutdown first, right? And then you power it down, and then once it's powered down, then you have to remember to flip it off, because otherwise the battery will drain. All right. And now let me show you what happens with this custom firmware if you don't do that. All right. So we're up and running, and I'm going to cold shut it down. Okay. Shut down completely. So let's fire it back up. All right. And you're going to see a safety catch. Unclean shutdown detected. Now this does preserve the generic, where is it over here? The generic SD card. It does preserve that SD card, which is cool. But man, oh man, does it ever take the boot time and just send it through the roof, which, here again, if I'm just firing this up to play a game for a minute, then, it defeats the purpose. Now you're probably asking, well, then why don't you just shut it down properly every time? And yes, I do that. However, when you branch off from Game Boy and Nintendo and you get into like arcade and stuff like that, and weird things like maybe the inbuilt native programs, there are certain ones that change the function of this button, and a couple of times, every so often, I get locked out and I can't shut it down properly, and then I get forced to wait through that screen, which sucks. But apart from that, it's a solid handheld. It is the one and only clamshell. I almost cold shut it down again. Hold on, let me shut it down properly. There we go. It's the one and only clamshell handheld like this in the budget bracket. There aren't many clamshell handhelds in the emulation scene in general. We've got this, we've got the Funky S, and then PowKiddy has the X18S, whatever. And I've heard that's not great. Hemrock bought one of those, and he didn't really have a good time with it. So here's what I think should happen. There should be a clone of this that does it with a higher bracket hardware. We've seen that happen in the emulation handheld scene before. There was something called the Little Dragon King, the LDK, which was cloned by Ambernick to make the RG280V. It looks exactly the same. It's the same form factor, but it's much, much higher quality. That's what we need to have happen with this. I would happily drop $100 to get one of these that can do more and has a better build quality. But apart from that, still a great machine. Everyone loves this machine. It is the most prolific of all of the budget handhelds, and it's the one that I think is still around from a couple generations ago, because usually, people buy these, they end the run and they just kind of go by the wayside or whatever. But this one I still see people recommend. So that's my review of the PowKiddy V90. Yeah, good machine, good gateway into emulation handhelds, and big thanks to Hemrock for giving this to me, because I still have fun with it.